This is the craziest kitchen purchase I've ever made, but now I can't stop using it. I've spent 28 years of my life buying pasta from the grocery store because I was always scared to make homemade pasta. It seemed messy, it seemed pricey, it seemed complicated, but with this, you can make 7 different types of pasta and it's so easy, even I can do it. I'll show you how to use it, the different types of pasta I can make, how the taste compares to boxed pasta, and how difficult it is to clean so you know if it's actually worth buying. Normally you'd think making homemade pasta is super hard. You'd get a huge bowl, you'd start tossing in some flour, some eggs, some other ingredients, then you gotta knead the dough with your hands, all of that hard work. And I'm not a chef. But with this pasta maker, even beginners like me can use it. So let's get started with making our homemade pasta. This is only a couple of ingredients and it's super easy, starting with 200 grams of semolina flour, and then 50 grams of the 00 flour. And that's our entire dry mixture. You can of course do something different, but I just like these 2 ingredients, and then I'm gonna quickly mix it up with a fork here. Probably don't have to do this step, but I like it nice and integrated. And then our wet ingredients is only 2 ingredients also. We're gonna take 1 egg, and then I bet you already have the other ingredient. It's just water mixed into that egg. We just wanna get the scale to read about 108 grams total. So I'm gonna add some water and then whisk this mixture together so that it kind of blends into one. And that is honestly the last step that we have to do before we go to the pasta maker, which does everything else. Now over to the pasta maker, all we have to do is open the lid right here, turn on the power, and pour our flour into the middle right here. Pour the whole thing directly, don't even have to worry about where it's going, and throw the lid back on. And then I'm gonna click this button right here, which is going to start the mixing of the pasta inside. So you'll see it start to mix. And while it does that for the next 3 minutes, I'm actually gonna add in my egg mixture slowly into there. This is probably the hardest part, is pouring this into there without spilling. But luckily with the spout on the measuring cup, it's making it pretty easy. And I'm just gonna slowly dispense it all into there. And that is seriously the last thing that we have to do before pasta is made into here. You're gonna see it mix fully on the inside for the next 3 minutes. You want that kind of crumbly texture that's showing inside of there. Otherwise the pasta comes out too dry or too wet. This is the perfect texture that we want. It's going to extrude it in just a couple minutes. And then as this countdown hits 0, it's gonna start spinning the other way on the inside, and now is when the extrusion actually starts. You're gonna see it start to come out of these holes right here, and it gives you this little tool to cut them off at the length that you want your pasta. So you can see we get these beautiful noodles coming out right away. They're not wet at all. They're perfect spaghetti noodles, and you can make them as long or as short as you want to. I'm gonna start off with a couple sets of long noodles right here. I'd say that's probably good enough. You just take this tool, slide it down, and just like that, you got your noodles. Or let's say you want them really short, like that short, you can just do it even sooner. But what if you don't want only spaghetti noodles? The gadget actually comes with 7 other attachments you can switch out to make different types of noodles. We're gonna make penne noodles today, but it also comes with other ones for fettuccine noodles. You've got some for tagliatelle, for lasagna noodles, pretty much any type of noodle that you wanna make. Now I will say, trying to switch out the attachment in the middle of making noodles is a little bit tricky and a little bit messy, but I'm gonna show you the process of actually doing that, and we're gonna do it right now. First off, I'm gonna cut off the rest of these noodles, and then basically you just twist these knobs right here. In general, this is a pretty easy process to switch out. Again, you're gonna see dough kind of stuck in between some areas here because we're right in the middle of making noodles. This front piece just comes off just like that, pretty simple. And then you take off the actual attachment that's making those spaghetti noodles. It can be a little tight on there, just gotta pull it off. There's kind of the dough that's in the middle of extruding. And then the attachment goes back into the lid right there, or you can just put it back onto that piece right there. And this screws back on, as long as you don't put it upside down. These twist back tight, and now we can continue the extrusion with penne noodles. They're just awesome, they're perfect. They're not too dry, not too wet. Get them as long as short as you want them. Those are some nice long penne noodles. Now, as you see it start to slow down, you can see these are coming out much slower. You can switch this to an extrusion only mode. Right now it is both mixing and extruding, but if you just trigger the power right here, turn it on and off, and switch this right here to extrusion only and hit start, it'll actually make them come out just a little bit faster and try and get all the remaining dough out of the inside. And then depending on your patience level, you can let all the dough kind of come out of this or as much as possible, or you can just stop it at some point. Like this is where I would probably give up on this. I will say one of the downsides is on the inside right here, you can see there's a little bit of dough kind of caught on the side and a little bit caught up here. You could kind of take it and move it around and help the machine a little bit and try and get the rest of it. Or a little bit of dough will go to waste, but honestly, it's not too much at all. Of course, now you might be thinking, you can buy boxes of pasta from the store for like $2. So is the taste difference of the homemade pasta actually worth it? Or is the gadget a waste of money? Let's get the box of pasta opened up, and we're actually gonna cook both of them and do a blind taste test to see if I can tell the difference. Now, of course, right away, you can see the color difference of the pasta. This is kind of like an orangey color. I'd say this is more in like the yellow range right here. So very clear color difference, which is why it needs to be a blind test, but let's go cook them first. Now, while that finishes up cooking, let's talk about cleaning. You obviously can't beat the cleanup of just throwing away an empty box when it's all done, but how difficult is it to clean the gadget? It does disassemble into quite a few pieces. So number one, you can take the lid off and then simply just wash in the top of the lid right here where the egg was and wash on the inside. Pretty easy to wash most of this. Part number two, you just unscrew these like I did when taking the attachment off. That will get this front plate off for you. So it's simple to unscrew, and then this really just needs a quick wipe down. It's usually not too dirty. Part three is the actual attachment itself. This is definitely going to be the most difficult part. I'll come right back to that. Part four is this white piece right here. You can see this does get a little bit of dough stuck on the outside and a little bit on the inside over here as well. So this is a little bit of an effort, but honestly, you can reach all of it with your hands, so it's not too bad to hand wash. Part number five is probably this piece right here that actually does the turning. Again, this gets dough stuck on it for sure, but a lot of that's just really easy to take off. You can see I cleaned off the whole layer of that. I can even grab all of this right here. So hand washing this part, again, pretty simple, not too bad. And then the last piece is just the mixing chamber right there. It just slides out. And again, most of that dough is gonna be super easy to actually just grab with your hands, and then you can quickly scrub all of this down with a sponge. It's all really easy to reach. But of course, the actual attachment itself, so that leftover dough that we didn't extrude, that's gonna be relatively easy to get out of here. You can see I already pulled off most of it in just a few seconds. Those little holes are gonna be the biggest problem about cleaning this gadget. You do have to go in with one of their provided tools right here and kind of scrape it through each of the holes. I will say on the penne, it's probably one of the harder ones because of how many little holes there are. On some of the other ones, there's just a couple holes that you can kind of slide in, but you do have to go at this for a couple of minutes to really get all of that dough out. You can see it comes out pretty quickly though. And overall, even though there's a lot of pieces, I can typically get this cleaned up in the 4 to 5 minutes that the pasta is actually cooking, so I don't find it to be that big of a deal, but of course, definitely more difficult than a box. Our 2 bowls of pasta are now ready. There's obviously a very clear difference. This is the homemade one in the red bowl and the boxed one in the blue bowl. You can see kind of the texture and the color difference on the homemade noodles. So let me get a blindfold on, and camera woman, AKA the wife, will mix up the bowls so that I don't know which one is which. By the way, I didn't use any other ingredients other than the noodles in boiling salted water right here. I didn't want to throw in butter and cheese or sauce or anything like that to kind of skew the flavor. I want to go direct comparison. So go ahead and mix up those bowls. And let's go into bowl number 1. So I've been eating the homemade pasta for weeks now, and I haven't had box pasta since. I'm 99% sure I just went back to box pasta because the flavor was really lacking. The texture is kind of like this rubbery, chewy texture. It just wasn't that great, but let me go to the right one just in case. Hopefully I'm not way off. And yeah, it's pretty obvious. I will say I can, of course, feel the texture difference too, which gives me a little bit of a hint to it, but this one has a much better, more pasta-rich flavor. It's not a rubber texture when you're biting into it. It's more like a springy kind of al dente texture, which I tried to cook them both to al dente, but again, you can really taste that difference. Did I get them right?
You did.
Yeah, so in my opinion, the homemade pasta is significantly better tasting, and these ingredients still only cost me about $2. So is the pasta maker actually worth it? In terms of taste, it's pretty obvious. The pasta maker is way better. In terms of cost, you do have to buy the pasta maker itself, but once you own it, the cost of pasta is pretty similar. And in terms of cleanup, obviously the box pasta wins. But one other advantage of the pasta maker is that you can make all 8 different types of pasta just by having the 2 types of flour and eggs at your home, versus with box pasta, you kind of have to know which one you want when you're at the grocery store. So 2 weeks later, you might want a different kind and you can't switch. There's another thing I always thought was so difficult until I found the perfect gadget for it. I'm talking about homemade cocktails, and in this video, I'll show you a gadget that completely changed bartending for me.